Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the final of a three-part series exploring the Converso and Latino connection to Israel. Before we get started, I would like to suggest to our guests that for optimal viewing experience, you should set your view to speaker's view. Okay, now let's get started. So my name is Michael Steinberger, and I am founder and CEO of Jewish Heritage Alliance, a platform dedicated to promoting the story of Sefarad on a global scale. Our alliance represents a global collaborative effort that brings together organizations, institutions, and individuals from the private and public sectors, thereby expanding our reach and broadening our scope. At this time, allow me to define some of the words and terminologies you will hear during this presentation. So the word Sefarad in Hebrew literally means Spain, but in historical context, Sefarad refers to the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, nowadays Spain and Portugal. The saga of Sefarad is a far-reaching, complex story with profound consequences. It is believed that the Jews first arrived in the Iberian Peninsula as early as biblical times, but the earliest archaeological proof dates to the 4th century. Jewish life in Spain ends abruptly with the expulsion from Spain in 1492 and 5 years later from Portugal. Jewish Heritage Alliance separates the Sefarad narrative into three key segments. The first segment begins with Jewish life in the Iberian Peninsula. This was a period of triumphs, trials, and tribulations, or what I term the good, the bad, and the ugly. During these centuries, Jews experienced periods we refer to as the Golden Age, a time of great achievements, but all of such good times inevitably led to periods of persecutions, massacres, and forced conversions. The 1492 Edict of Expulsion in Spain forced Sephardic Jews to convert to Christianity or leave, if they were able to do so, prompting a dispersion to locations including the Americas and the Middle East. Some conversos, or Jewish converts, tried to maintain their Jewish heritage in secret, under the threat of discovery and punishment from the Inquisition. During these discussions, you will hear terms such as conversos, crypto-Jews, Moranos, and new Christians. These names or labels are synonymous. They all refer to Jews that converted to Christianity. It is important to note that when discussing conversos and crypto-Jews, we are speaking of their descendants. The second part of the story details the global Jewish and converso diaspora that the expulsion from Spain and Portugal produced. Whereas some of the refugees of 1492 were able to get safe havens in the Eastern Mediterranean, the vast majority spent the rest of their lives amid succession of tribulations. The third segment of the story deals with the present day and the future, and is the segment we are discussing here today. The expulsion saw Jews and conversos traverse the globe, with many making their way to the Americas. It is noteworthy to mention that where there are approximately 16 million Jews in the world today, it is believed that there are over 200 million conversos. As the title of this series suggests, we are here to explore the converso and by extension, the Latino connection to Israel. We are honored to have three experts to discuss the significance of today's Converso as relating to Israel and the Jewish nation. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Samuel Richardson, representing Jewish National Fund USA. He is the Director of Small Communities Outreach, and he's also a descendant of the Conversos. Take it away, Sam.
Thank you, Michael, for that kind introduction. I would like to remind all of our guests today, before we get to the main program, that Jewish National Fund is more than trees. As a matter of fact, between 1903 and 1940, we had purchased thousands of dunams of land in Israel, which facilitated the creation of the borders adopted by the UN Partition Plan of 1947. And today, Team JNF USA, we are the water people, the environmentalists, the community builders, the Parks and Recreation Department. JNF USA provides the means to help all Israelis of all abilities. We're the educators, both here in the United States as well as in Israel. We're the mission specialists, the virtual travel agents. We encourage resettlement from the core to the northern and southern peripheries by building brand new communities from the ground up and helping small businesses create new jobs. In February, we launched the bomb shelter beautification program. We were not planning on them being used so soon. However, we are glad that they were fully ready for use. We've also been supplying resilience centers for those with special needs, as well as the general public. JNF has also increased the purchasing of firefighting equipment for volunteer firefighters in the communities bordering Gaza.
It all begins with a vision of lush and breathtaking forests where once was only rocky and brown land. A vision of transforming the Negev and the Galilee, injecting a vitality that is transforming them into places people want to live. A vision for us to speak our values, leaving no one behind. A vision of quenching the thirst of Israel's population and allowing the agricultural economy to thrive. A vision that searches for solutions that will make a better tomorrow. A vision of a continuum, ensuring that we are raising tomorrow's leaders today. A vision that understands that a nation must know its past to create a stronger future. Be a part of our vision. Join us.
And yes, we do want to be your voice in Israel. The Jewish National Fund is investing for the long term, from the forests of the north to the deserts of the south. The most important ingredient, however, is people, the Jewish people coming from the four corners of the earth to rejoin the people of Israel to the land of Israel. Jewish National Fund affiliate Nefesh B'Nefesh makes this process easier by removing the professional, logistical, and financial obstacles. Please partner with us today. Participate in the continuing task of protecting and building the land of Israel for the people of Israel. Make it secure for our children, our children's children, and generations to come. It takes all of us working together to ensure that tomorrow will be a safe and secure one for our people and for our land. jnf.org/donate Converso Part 3 to donate by credit card. And now, friends, let's turn our attention to the continuing saga of Sefarad. Come with me as we continue to uncover the story of a journey from darkness to light, one that began centuries ago and continues to this very day with our partner, Jewish Heritage Alliance.
People are coming back. People are coming back after hundreds of years of being denied their Jewish heritage.
On a history that was hidden, and I say hidden, not lost, but actually I think it was hidden.
It's a piece that's missing. People have not understood it. People have not known about it, and it's been this big secret.
What happened in Sefarad is a very important segment of Jewish and world history that was overlooked.
And they'd say to me, you know, I have really strange things. We're definitely not Jewish, but we somehow always seem to light candles on Friday night.
I started my Jewish life as a convert, and very happily so. My soul had aligned with my, let's say, my person.
Whoa, my God, it's incredible. My country, the country I love, is Jewish too.
Where did we come from? And how did these people come to Mexico, come to the southern part of the United States?
They say that 25 to 50% of the early colonists to Latin America were recently converted from Judaism, meaning in the last generation before they came. I mean, this is an extraordinary idea.
First guest today is Dr. Rabbi Peter Tarlow. Peter is the founder of the Center for Latino-Jewish Relations and Crypto-Jewish Studies and is a renowned expert in the subject of Sefarad. He was the director and rabbi of Texas A&M Hillel for 30 years and has been actively involved with the unfolding Converso phenomenon. Take it away, Peter.
Thank you, and I want to thank everyone for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. I've been trying to think through how in 15 minutes or so, I can talk about the relationship, one, between the Latino community, and two, the Anusim, B'nai Anusim, or the crypto-Jewish community, to the land of Israel. And of course, we're doing this at a very interesting and difficult time. The last war was successful by Israel on a military basis, but Israel suffered terribly in the issue of Hasbara. And that's one of the reasons why today is such an important issue. Israel, in order to succeed in the future, and I want to build on what Sam said, to have that secure future, has to have the support of major powers. That means Europe and the United States. And I live in part of the United States, which is really the heartland of the crypto-Jewish experience. It is the area that is probably the most pro-Israel. And were this area to not continue to be pro-Israel, the political consequences would be incredible, and not in a good sense, but in a bad sense. We're already seeing certain problems that are taking place. The American media, on the whole, tends to be lukewarm to negative when it comes to Israel, including major newspapers such as the New York Times. We see their impact on college campuses, where many Jewish kids feel totally isolated today. We see the impact even in the evangelical community, where if we divide it by people over 50 and under 50, those on the younger side of the evangelical community, only about 35% support Israel, and over 30% have no idea at all. That means that some of the heartland for political support that Israel has counted on may not be there in 10, 15, or 20 years. We even see this on some levels within the Jewish community itself, where some parts of the Jewish community have become neutral, not yet hostile, but neutral, certainly not loving, and highly critical of the Israeli government. Again, that doesn't mean that one has to be supportive of all positions of the Israeli government to be pro-Israel, but we do see that there are difficulties that are taking place. The major debates that are taking place today in Congress and the almost civil war within the Democratic Party are signs of that split that's taking place around Israel. So we have to be aware of that. Now, what does that have to do with us? I tried to think through, one, the issue of demographics, and two, the issue of how the Latino community divides. And it occurred to me that we might go back to the Passover story and think of the four sons. And those four sons represent four different aspects of human nature. To a great extent, that's also true of the Latino community. And I'm going to speak for the crypto-Jewish community is a subset of the Latino community. I work with the major leaders of the Latino community. I'm Spanish speaking and I live in the heartland. And while there may possibly be more crypto Jews in Brazil than in Mexico, that's a debatable question, the influence of the Mexican Southern United States crypto Jewish community politically well outweighs anything that takes place in Brazil. You cannot look at numbers, you have to look at political power. And if we look at congressional votes, if we look on how people are voting in the United States and in Mexico, then it's very clear, and those are almost one people. They're on both sides of what I call the Rio Bravo land, which is about 100 miles north of the Rio Grande to about 100 miles south of the Rio Grande. That area is the heartland of crypto Judaism, certainly when it comes to political power within the United States in this administration and future administration, be it a Democratic administration or a Republican administration. So let's look at that first, the Latino community. I think we can divide them like the four sons into four sections. I'm going to go backwards. Probably the largest segment of that population is the fourth son, Shelo Yodei Lishol. Most Latinos really have very little idea. If we showed them the film that was just shown, they would look and say, Maze, what is this? They'd be completely confused by what we're speaking. And I know that because I speak to these people on a daily basis in Spanish, and Texas is a bilingual state. The second group of people, and then I'll go back to them, we might talk about is the Ben Tam, the simple son. The son who, okay, if you tell me that I'm Jewish, maybe there's something there. I didn't know about it. It's not that I'm not interested, but he's the person who says, Mazot, what is this all about? The third group is certainly the Rasha, the evil. Now, there's really two parts of that. One is they just don't want anything to do with us. Okay, that's certainly their right, and no one's trying to force anything on anybody's level. But there's also now a growing segment within the Latino community that connects the Israel with colonialism and with a negative image. And that could become a major problem politically within American and Latin American relations to Israel. And finally, you have the Chacham, the one who wants to know, who's interested in learning. And that's where probably our greatest opportunity is. The Latino community today in the United States is the largest ethnic group in the country. It is now bigger than the Black community. It is wealthy. It is becoming highly sophisticated. And these people can literally tip the balance of power within the United States. What does that mean? That means we have to begin to show the roots. And when I take Latino leaders, I'll be in Israel on July 5. When I take Latino leaders to Israel, one of the things I constantly say to them is, note, at the end of this trip, you will not feel like you are in a foreign country. You will feel like you are part of family. And in Spanish, I say to them, familia siempre cuida la familia. Family always takes care of family. So part of the image that I want to get across to the Latino community is that Israel is not a foreign colonial power. It's part of their life. And many of them do have that interaction. Many don't know. Some don't want to know. But for those who do, we now have a chance to redo the demographics of the United States. There are approximately, depending on how you want to count, 5 to 7.5 million Jews in the United States. The high number would be 7.5. The low number would be about 5 million Jews. You can take that as you like. Even if you take the 7.5 million Jews, the highest possible number going, many of those people are not necessarily going to become involved with Israel. And many of those people are not sure exactly who they are or what they are. And in totality, we're still a drop in the election bucket. And if anyone's paying attention to the demographics and to the number of people literally coming across the border from Mexico into the United States every day, it's now estimated to be 700,000 people so far this year. They eventually are going to become voters, and they will change the demographics of the United States radically. So our question is going to be, are we able to get these people as allies? Or are we going to take these people and are we going to permit them to become anti-Israel and therefore become part of the 40 million voters who will have incredible emphasis on American foreign policy? Politicians tend to look at one thing, votes, and they go where the votes are. And that means that in order for us to assure Israel's survival and our own survival, we need to begin to really change our demographics and begin to open up and to allow people to see this as a whole new world. Now, there are many, the Jewish community is also divided. We can clearly say that there are at least two Jewish communities, the Orthodox community and the liberal community. Both of those communities subdivide. Within the Orthodox community, there are pro-Zionists and anti-Zionists. Between the liberal community, there are pro-Zionists and anti-Zionists. One of the things we do know is when we're able to get Latinos to become interested in their Jewish heritage, they are almost always pro-Israel. And therefore, the more people that we have, the more we're able to have impact on American foreign policy. Now, there is a revival. It's not as much as I would like, but there is a revival. Certainly in southern Texas and in New Mexico and Arizona, synagogues that were once on the verge of death, especially along the borders of the Rio Grande, are now filled again. Yiddish has been replaced with Spanish, but it's, you know what? I can deal with Hebrew and Spanish just as well as I can deal with Hebrew and Yiddish. The bottom line is that we're beginning to see that form of renaissance. For example, in California, and I have a congregation in Mexicali that's across the border from Calexico in California. We run a fusion where we do for Hanukkah, we break a piñata, which is a kind of a Mexican symbol, and filled with candy. All the children of the neighborhood come. Why do I do that? Not because I'm trying to push Judaism down anybody's throat, but because they now see the Jewish people as a normal part of the Latino experience. And doing that means that when they see a Magen David on the flag of Israel, or they see the state of Israel, they don't see it as a foreign entity, they see it as part of their own, and therefore become pro-Israel. We have to begin to really rethink where we're going. If we do not, we are putting ourselves in tremendous demographic danger. If we do, that means we are going to have to get people in Israel to recognize these people. We've got to simplify the process of re-entry. We're going to have to, and not again, is everyone going to convert? But you know what? It doesn't matter if you convert or not. I want you to feel part of the Jewish family. And I want you to be proud of your Jewish heritage, just like I want you to be proud of your Jewish religion. We have to do both. And if we're able to do that, then we can assure that Israel is going to have huge support, not only in the United States, but I work in Mexico. And I can tell you, Mexico's influence across Latin America is tremendous. As Mexico goes, so do the most Latin American nations. And we would be a mistake to forget that the partition plan was approved of in 1947 only with the votes of the Latin American nations. They were the one bloc that supported us after World War II. We dare not lose that support. And that means that we cannot take it for granted. We have to begin to show an ethnic and cultural relationship between the Latino community and the Jewish community. That's what I do every day. That's why I bring Latino leaders to Israel on a regular basis. I'm now starting a second program of bringing Jewish leaders to Mexico so that they will be able to understand and see the original inquisitional papers, because there is as much ignorance on the Jewish community as there is in the Latino community. Both communities need to become aware of the interlocking relationship between the two of us. If we do that, then surely we will be able to say, B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, like at the end of the Passover Seder, next year in Jerusalem. If we do not do that, that puts all of us in danger. And so I wanted to begin this section by looking at those four sons and the reality that only by working together, by creating a sense of knowledge, of becoming B'nei Chachamim, the sons of the wise, are we able to bring through a sense of belonging and knowledge. If that's true, we may have at least 200 million friends in the world. And when you're the Jewish people, we need as many friends as we can get. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for this very comprehensive coverage of this important phenomenon. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to introduce our second speaker, and that's Mr. Ashley Perry, or Perez. Ashley is president of Reconnecting, an organization dedicated to reconnecting descendants of Spanish and Portuguese Jews with Israel and the Jewish world. He has served as an advisor to Israel's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, rather, and worked in the Prime Minister's office as well. Ashley is traveling today, so he submitted his discussion via video. Please play the video.
Thank you very much, Michael. First of all, for this opportunity and also for the work that you do. I'd like to reintroduce myself and say a little bit more about myself. My name is Ashley Perry, but my real name is Ashley Perez. I originally come from what's called the Spanish Portuguese, the Western Sephardic community in London. My family fled, first of all, Spain in 1492, fled to Portugal, and then fled the Iberian Peninsula as a whole, at the beginning of the 16th century, first to Hamburg, then to Amsterdam, and around 350 years ago to London. For us in the Spanish or Portuguese community, the Western Sephardic community, the Inquisition, the Anno Sim, that whole period is as if it happened recently. It's very much part of our tradition. It's part of our memory. It's even part of our liturgy. We still say a prayer. What is it? 100 and maybe 50 years since the Inquisition formally disbanded. We still say a prayer for our brethren in prison in the Inquisition. A lot of our liturgy is said in Portuguese, and many of our customs are still tied up to the memory of the Iberian Peninsula, the Inquisition and the expulsion. So for us, this is not a foreign or an ancient historic concept. The Anno Sim is part of our history, our community who are pretty much made up of Anno Sim who fled the Iberian Peninsula, who were forcibly converted and reverted to becoming full Jews, sometimes one short generation after, sometimes hundreds of years later. In 2001, I made Aliyah from London to Israel. From 2008 till 2015-16, I worked in the Israeli government. I worked on many issues, but one of the key issues for me, and one of the reasons I sort of left government to go into private life, was a very interesting chance meeting. One point I was, I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I was introduced to this very interesting man by then Agriculture Minister Yair Shamir, former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir's son. And he said to me, you have to meet this person. I know that the background you come from, and he talks about millions, tens of millions of Anno Sim around the world. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I met this guy. He told me the most fascinating story. His background comes from a Russian background, but he just sort of fell into this issue because he speaks around the world, and people just came up to him, said, I hear you're from Israel, you're Jewish, so am I. Or lifted out a Magen David, looked around and put it back in. And he didn't understand who they were. So at one point he turned to a friend of his and said, I don't understand. Who are these people who keep on approaching me and telling me the same story? He said, these are Conversos, crypto Jews. I can't remember the term that he said the person used, but the first question this person asked his friend was, how many are there? And the response was tens of millions. And he thought, no, come on. I can understand a few thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but tens of millions. He said, do your own research and find out. So over about 3 or 4 years, this person spent hundreds of thousands of his own dollars, major researchers, major genealogical academics, etc., really to understand, first of all, where they are, who they are, but most importantly, what they want. So I came on board and we created an organization called Reconnecting, and the simple goal or mission of our organization is to help those who seek it. We're obviously not missionizing, we're not going out to tell people what to do, but those who seek it, we're helping them to reconnect in any way they see fit. If someone says, I want to reconnect by formally returning to the Jewish people, that's one way. There's all the way the other says, I'm not looking to change anything about my life. I just want to know more about my ancestry, and thousands of shades of gray in between. At the end of, I think it was 2018, beginning of 2019, there was a very comprehensive, multidisciplinary, international academic research done on the origins, according to the DNA, of the Latin American people, Latinos and Hispanics. And they came up with something remarkable. And basically the research, the top line of the research, and they weren't looking for this, said that 1 in 4 Latinos, Hispanics have significant Jewish ancestry, not just a drop, significant Jewish ancestry. Now you extrapolate that to all the people in Latin America, Latinos, Hispanics in North America, other places, Spain, Portugal, elsewhere. You get to a number over 200 million. Now, again, that doesn't mean there's 200 million people knocking at our door seeking a return. What that does mean is there are 200 million people around the world outside of the formative Jewish community who have significant Jewish ancestry because their ancestors were forcibly converted and disconnected from the major parts of the Jewish body. Many of those people, not a majority, but many are seeking some level of reconnection. And it is incumbent on the Jewish world, the state of Israel, to create some sort of infrastructure to welcome these people. What we've been doing over the years is we've been meeting everybody from the Prime Minister of the State of Israel to the President of the State of Israel, to the head of the Jewish Agency, to the chairman and presidents of all the major Jewish organizations, or at least many of them around the world. And we've been telling them this story as an opportunity, as a challenge. One major Jewish official told me that this is the greatest challenge of for the Jewish people at the beginning of the 21st century, because it has so many positive ramifications. You can imagine, you don't need me to tell you what they are. But the important thing is that there are, I would say, millions, tens of millions of people who seek to reconnect in some way. Again, I give you those different examples, but there are many, many others. And we are contacted all the time, and we're working with many of the organizations in the field. And what we decided to do also a few years ago is add another layer to it. And we created for the first time in history the Knesset Caucus for the reconnection with the descendants of Spanish and Portuguese Jewish communities. So there is an official body in the Knesset which meets and discusses and shares insight onto what should happen. Now, this isn't an official body, it's a caucus, it's not a committee, but there is a lot that can be done with that. We had our first meeting where we had 250, 300 people. Now, usually caucuses in the Knesset have 50 to 60 people. But it generated such interest, and there were multiple members of Knesset, rabbis, academic leaders, political, Jewish organizational leaders. And what we've seen is a great momentum, such a great momentum, and I know my friend Ophir will talk about it, that a number of years ago, the Diaspora Ministry, headed at that time by Diaspora Minister Naftali Bennett, soon to be Prime Minister, created a committee to look into what should the State of Israel's position be on those who have Jewish ancestry. Now, there are many groups around the world who have some level of Jewish ancestry, whether it's people in Poland whose grandparents suffered in the Holocaust and they wanted to just basically disregard their Judaism, to many, many other communities around the world. The largest community, undoubtedly, are the descendants of Spanish Portuguese Jewish communities, the Andalusian, Conversos, crypto-Jews, Moranos, whatever you want to call it. And then they put out recommendations. I know Ophir shares my view that hopefully in this next government, because for 2 years we haven't had a government that hasn't been able to enunciate any major policies, but I hope that this report will be put on the government table at some point with this new government, and they'll take some of these recommendations seriously, because it is a great opportunity. My overall goal is really to create awareness first, as a first step, because I believe to meet any challenge, first of all, you have to have people who understand the challenge exists. And at this point in time, I mean, I would actually say we're doing quite well, because a number of years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, no one knew about this challenge, no one at all. Today, the fact that government ministries are talking about it, the fact that Knesset are holding meetings about it. I helped write a law in the last Knesset, which will hopefully make it into law during this Knesset, for a day to commemorate the victims of the Inquisition. And one of the parts of this law is that at least one day a year will be beholden to Israeli children learning not just about the Inquisition and the expulsion and the story of Sefarad in general, but also the ramifications. In other words, the B'nai Anosim today. Who are they? Where are they? What should we be doing about it? So we really have taken major, major strides. It is on the, I would say, the global Jewish agenda. It's low down. My goal, and many others like us, like Michael and others, our goal is to make sure that this is near the top of the global Jewish agenda, because it really is the game-changing moment for the Jewish people. It is the greatest challenge for the Jewish people in the State of Israel. And in all my meetings, and I was very surprised when I first set out these meetings and I met with, as I said, political, religious, academic, Jewish organizational leaders, I expected about half and half people to say, okay, that's very nice. You know, I'm very happy about it. And half the people to look at me and say, you know, this is a bit of a dream. This isn't serious. Thank you very much. I have to say in all my meetings, I would say 95% plus of all the leaders that I've met with had a very positive feeling towards this. And they said, what can we do? My first statement was always, let's make sure more and more people hear about it. Make sure your organization, make sure the people who you talk with understand this, because these people are wanting to reconnect. And I always look at it as two sides of the ledger. There's the formative Jewish world, the state of Israel, the Jewish diaspora, and the other side is this emerging Jewish community. We were disconnected for 500 years. It is now time for the great reconnection. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that so many more people understand this, are aware of this. So next time they hear about it, next time someone outstretches their hand, they're ready for it. And we need to create programs to spread that awareness and start thinking in practical terms, what can we do to make sure that this reconnection takes place? And that could be in the Knesset, as I said, through a law, could be through the government committee, could be through programs of major Jewish organizations, could be making sure, as I believe that we have done, making sure that this issue is in the global Jewish media regularly. There are op-eds about it, there are articles about it, and it's not a small phenomenon. We hear of a story here, we hear of a family there, a small community somewhere else. This is a mass movement, and we all have to be involved. I sometimes compare it to a certain extent to the struggle for the freedom of Soviet Jewry. Not to compare the two movements, they're not, but at the beginning, there were just a few crazies who kept on talking about this idea, who took radical ideas or radical steps to make sure that it was in the public consciousness. But eventually, it was at such a point where every single person in the Jewish world was involved with this, whether it was the President of the State of Israel, the head of the Jewish Agency, the head of the Jewish organizations, the average Jew on the streets, everybody was involved. And I believe that we have to move up to get to a point, that the tipping point, where it is the issue on the global Jewish agenda. And I believe that we've made massive, massive inroads in the last few years. And we're getting slowly but surely, but I hope we'll be at that tipping point soon. And everybody from the layperson up to the leaders of the Jewish world will become involved in this issue. We'll be thinking about how we can deal with this issue. We'll be creating practical programs for this issue because, as I said, it is a great challenge, but most importantly, a great opportunity for the Jewish people of the State of Israel.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for the message and for your good work. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our third panelist. I would like to introduce Mr. Ophir Ha'ivri. Ophir is the co-founder and vice president of Herzl Institute in Jerusalem and distinguished senior fellow at the Edmund Burke Foundation in Washington, D.C. Ophir held several posts with the Israeli government. In addition to serving as member of the Council of Higher Education, Ophir was chairman of a government commission on peripheral Jewish communities, and he will share with us his work and commitment to embracing emerging communities such as the Conversos. Thank you for being here today, Ophir. Take it away.
Okay, so it's good to be with you all this evening. I'll start with describing a little while the work of the committee I chaired. When in the last, I would say, decade, myself and other people came across more and more cases of, I would say, meetings and activities by groups who claimed or could prove actually some kind of Converso background. And myself and other people who were somehow in regular communication with the government, we found out that basically it's the government institution in Israel simply do not know how to deal with this issue because it's something that is, if you want, unrecognizable to them, meaning the Israeli institutions know what's a tourist, they know what's a foreign worker, they know what's a Jew, or at least someone who has some rights according to the law of return, but they simply couldn't even fathom, who are those people, what do they want, how many are there. So myself and some other friends, we proposed to then Minister of the Diaspora Affairs. Then it was a Knesset member named Naftali Bennett, who by chance or maybe not chance, is being actually, as we speak, being sworn in as a prime minister right now, and hopefully he'll follow through the recommendation of the committee which he actually gave the okay to. So basically, with some other members, we chaired the work of a committee. We worked for about 1 year, mostly during 2017. And we looked at, in general, communities and groups and individuals who have some kind of affinity with the Jewish people. That's a very, very large or very wide description. But we found out that I would say 80 or 90% of such people are, I mean, the largest group by far are people who have some background in the Converso community. Those people are, of course, mostly of Spanish and Portuguese ancestry, which later they immigrated to the American continent, meaning Mexico, South America, other places, and later on parts that today are the US. But we shouldn't think that this covers all of them. Some of these people also went to other places. For instance, while many, I would say, tried to get away from the Inquisition going westwards, some went east, and there were various holdings by the Spanish crown at that time that were out of the Iberian Peninsula, mainly in Italy. So in various areas of Italy, mainly in Sicily, there was an influx of many people of Jewish origin from Spain, and also there were local Italian Jews in areas controlled by the Spanish crown. And it took some time, and eventually those areas too were subjected to the same laws and pressure by the Inquisition to convert or leave. And so actually there are descendants of conversos, not only in Latin America and Spain and Portugal, of course, but also in Italy, in France, and other countries. I will tell you an interesting story, maybe to conclude, about a meeting I had in Sicily. So our committee worked for about a year. We met with historians, we met with people who are doing research on current communities and groups from Brazil, from Mexico, from the US, from other places. We met also with some representatives, individuals from such groups, just to get the feeling of what they're about, let's say. I can give you one example, which is, I believe, very interesting, which is that the man who was the Israeli ambassador in Colombia, his name was Benjamin Arbel. He just died after our committee, a few weeks after he actually testified in front of our committee. He was already very old, but he told me that when he became the first resident ambassador of Israel in Colombia, he went once to a meeting at the second city of Colombia. It was a port, and he wanted to meet with the economic leadership of that city in order to try to establish commercial contacts with Israel. So he contacted the mayor, and the mayor said, I will organize at my house a meeting with 12, 13, 15 people of leading leaders of the local economy, meaning the bank manager, the port manager, and so on and so forth. And Arbel told us that he came to the meeting and they were sitting around the table and starting to talk. And then the mayor said, actually, all of the people in this room are of Jewish origin. Arbel was very much surprised. And it seems that in many of these communities, there had been a gradual return to some kind of Jewish identity, and there were some, let's say, Sephardic rabbis which were aiding them, and for various reasons, the developments in Colombia went through, let's say, up and down. We can discuss this maybe later, but even today, our committee received a report that the number of communities we'll call them former conversos, who regard themselves as Jewish, meaning they are living as Jews, as community of Jews. They have a praying house and so on and so forth. Are the former Jewish community of Colombia numbered something like 3,000 people. Those communities number like 20,000 people. So actually, we found, I mean, the ambassador told us, eventually, the president of Colombia will be approached by a group saying, you know, we're Jewish, and you know, we're 20,000 people, and the Jewish community is 3,000 strong. And eventually, this guy will say, you know, how can I know who's, and he will ask probably the state of Israel or something like that, right? Because he will rightly so say, who am I to decide, you know, who are those people who are Jewish, who's not Jewish? So clearly our committee recommended, there are many similar cases, I'll just give you one example, that in the past, this was for various reasons, an almost invisible reality, because many of those people, even if someone had a tradition in his own family that they are of Jewish origin, or even if someone studied in the library that his surname is a classic Jewish surname, this guy would live in some town in Brazil or Mexico, and he wouldn't have even a Jewish community there, and he wouldn't know how to get to someone or how to ask anyone. But in the last 2 or 3 decades, because of the internet and because of new ways to find information, the quantity of people who are interested in this and are looking for the roots has been skyrocketing. And so what was maybe in the past may have been regarded as some kind of curiosity, you know, 20 people every year, it's a very minor phenomena, now has become a stream, and we expect it to become actually larger and larger. And so we recommended that the state of Israel take several steps to address this issue and recognize it exists and try to work with it. We, on purpose, we avoided entering the issue of conversion because, first of all, most of the people we met weren't at this point interested in conversion. They were interested in other aspects of connection with the Jewish people in Israel. Some of them wanted to learn more about Israel, Judaism, the story of Israel. Even many times people want to even only learn Hebrew. Sometimes people wanted to be active in favor of Israel. In other cases, people wanted to even come to Israel for a year or two to study. And in some cases, relatively few of them, there were people who were very interested in conversion. So our committee on purpose said, we are not experts on conversion. We will not enter into that. We are, first of all, want to create the first step or the basis for some kind of relationship between Israel and such groups and such individuals. And so we recommended several recommendations that I would say I would mention 3 of them, and that would be that one, that there would be in every Israeli embassy around the world some officer whose role is devoted to being a liaison with such groups, such individuals, meaning trying to organize something like every year a meeting with them, of the ambassador, trying to look if there are activities that the embassy and Israel can initiate to establish contacts with them, and so on and so forth. So this is one kind of activity. The other activity, we recommended that there will be some kind of organized traveling to Israel by, I would say, leaders of these communities, meaning people who are more invested and are ready to learn more, to come and devote a few weeks coming to Israel, and later on, in effect, becoming the leaders of these communities, of these groups. So this would be the second aspect. And the third would be for Israel to, I would say, encourage not only I would say, Israel vis-a-vis some community or some group, but somehow encourage the horizontal connection between such groups in some kind of organization or meetings, meaning not that people from Brazil and Argentina and Mexico and everyone is only dealing with the issues relating to his own small community, but trying to create some kind of Converso agency, or I don't have the name, but you get the idea, some kind of organization that covers them and can help them make their voices heard, not as individuals or a small group of 20 people, but as a larger group, and also to be the voice for the common themes that interest them. Because we find that already, although there are issues that are particular to every community or every group, there are some issues that are fairly visible across the line. So these are three of our recommendations. At the beginning of 2018, the recommendations were, I would say, put on the Israeli government's table. And as these things go, things moved very slowly. We didn't expect anything else, but we hoped that it would become faster. And unfortunately, as you all know, during 2019, after an election, there has been a virtual standstill of the Israeli decision-making process for more than 2 years because of a political stalemate. And unfortunately, our cause has suffered, falling between chairs, and we have not succeeded in bringing it any further. But happily, today, hopefully, the stalemate has stopped, and apparently, the minister who ordered this report is now going to be prime minister, and we fervently hope that he will want to renew his commitment to this issue and take it, if you want, under his wing as one of the issues that he will take forward as prime minister. Can only hope that, but we will see in the coming months if that is the case. I hope so very much. And I have friends that know the prime minister and are close to him, and they think that they can help in this direction, and we'll see.
Thank you very much, Ophir, for the insight. I mean, that was very, very informative. Sam, we kind of went through the Q&A periods.
Right. Well, let's take a couple of minutes. Going back to Rabbi Tarlow, I think this is a good question. What do you recommend to be the role of the typical American Jewish man or woman in the current and future struggle for support of the state of Israel within the community? You're on mute.
I assume that you're referring to the Latino community and not the Jewish community.
Right. Because you talked at the high level. What about at the general family level?
One of the things we have to do is we have to get into the Latino churches and get the organizational structure within Latino churches to become pro-Israel. Secondly, we need to make sure that Latinos are aware of everything that Israel is doing and their relationship to Israel. And that means that I don't think it should be hard to sell the morality and the ethics of what Israel's doing politically, but unfortunately, people don't read that in the newspaper. So we have to come up with other ways of doing it. For example, I write a weekly parasha that's read through in Spanish, that's read through much of the Latino community in the United States and Mexico. While I speak Bible, I always phrase it in a way that makes sure that people end up becoming pro-Israel. So those very quickly are things that we can do, but it means person-to-person relationships.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. And here's an interesting question. Would there be any benefit to considering bringing conversos who convert to Israel like we did for the Ethiopian community and assist and support in settlement? And that's for anybody.
Ophir, you want to take a stab at this?
Okay, but basically, in theory, yes. But the point is that the Ethiopian community is relatively, I mean, the issue there is very small. We are talking about a few thousand people at the moment, meaning people who are of Jewish ancestry in Ethiopia, whose ancestry converted to Christianity and now want to return. We are talking about a few thousand people. So it's in a sense, in Israel, it's a non-issue. While the range of the numbers and range of people among the conversos is massive. So in any way, it won't be a very easy or small task. It basically, if Israel goes into that direction, it would become I would say, the main goal of its Jewish outreach activity.
I'd like to also point out something very important, which has been discussed by prior panelists, and that is that the Converso community is very much different than either the Ethiopian or the Russian community. The argument that the Conversos, friends of ours, make is that the Converso community it sort of runs one by one. They're individuals that they don't show up with families as did the Russians and the Ethiopians. I think that part of what we're doing at Jewish Heritage Alliance, with the help of the panelists here and others, is we're trying to bring attention to the government of Israel, reintroduce the urgency of this matter. But it's something that's going to take some time. But the key answer is these are two different types of groups. The Ethiopians were a group that was consolidated and it was easier to deal with them. To some extent, it was true of the Russian Jewry. The Converso community is very dispersed, not organized, and that's why our job is to create an outreach program and let them find us and be welcoming of them. Next question.
Right. I want to go back to Ophir just real quick. You talked about the committee and all the work that you've been done. Is there a place to find reports that the committee has compiled on your work?
My committee's report should be online, meaning like a PDF or something like that, on the site of the Diaspora Ministry. We gave the report, of course, in Hebrew, but there are supposed to be English and Spanish versions. Okay. So if you look for it,
I think we have access to that. I think you or Ashley sent it to me. I have it both in the Hebrew and in the English. So if somebody wants, they can email us.
Great, excellent, excellent. And last question is for those who do convert and make Aliyah, will they be greeted in Israel equally by Israeli institutions and government agencies as have been others, whether from Ethiopia, Russia, or the United States or Europe? Is there any distinction, positive or negative, for conversos who make Aliyah?
Before I let Ophir tackle that, I would just tell everybody to go back to our previous event where we had Ginny Milgram and Hannah, and they talk about that issue. So no, the answer is there is no real red carpet or welcoming committee. it's an uphill fight, and that's one of the problems. I'll let Ophir answer it as well. Go ahead, Ophir.
I would say that there are two aspects to this. The first aspect is the way that the Israeli population reacts to it, and to my pleasant surprise, in all cases that I've seen, people who are either converts who converted or are in the process are really greeted by the Israelis themselves very, very warmly, and people are really very happy about it. The official formal institutions is another thing, and it's not really specific about conversos, because even people of Russian origin we are not talking about people who are like 200 years ago have some Jewish connection, but people who are actually, it's someone whose great-grandfather is Jewish, or even someone who has made Aliyah, is in Israel, but is not recognized as Jewish. Even this transition is being treated, I would say, very harshly by our authorities. The formal authorities of Israel are really not making it easy on people who really want to convert and to.
Okay, so in closing, I'd like to point out that the Sefarad legacy resides in both the Sephardic Jewish community and the Converso communities. But as you've heard here today, the glaring difference is that there are only 16 million Jews in the world today, and there are an estimate 200 million plus conversos. Pay attention to the number. We're maybe 16 million Jews, and we're talking about over 200 million conversos. Today's takeaway is the significance and relevance of the converso, and by extension, the Latino community to Israel. As the recent fighting between Israel and Hamas suggests, there is a growing global avalanche of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions. With the diminishing influence, as Peter pointed out, of the Jewish communities in America and elsewhere, this is a time to embrace all Israel-loving people. This is a time to embrace the Converso communities everywhere, of people with a direct connection to the land of Israel. Those are my closing remarks. For those who want to follow more or learn more about the Sefarad experience in general, I invite you to follow Jewish Heritage Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I also want to thank everybody for joining us today for this touching and educational presentation. A number of questions have gone unanswered. Please be assured that we've collected them. We will distribute them to the panelists, and then we will collect them back again and send them out to all of our registered guests with the answers, and also the contact information, so that you can be in touch with our panelists directly. You'll also receive in an email from me later this week a link to the recording of this event as well as the prior two events, so that you can make sure to get everything in context. I also want to ask you again to consider joining in this important work, partnering with Jewish National Fund, and ensuring that we have our land for our people in the future. As someone who himself descended from conversos, we've learned together today, it's important to know that there are resources available for reconnecting to and supporting our people in our land. And so if this event has been meaningful to you, please consider a direct investment in Nefesh B'Nefesh, that organization which specializes in reconnecting our people to our land. So please join me now for a touching insight into the thoughts of young Jewish men and women from all over the world. We're even going to see one from Colombia, who chose to become lone soldiers in the Israeli Defense Forces. And finally, we'll close with a tribute to those who have made Aliyah to our land and sing together our national song, Hatikva.
As the official outsourced arm of the Israeli Defense Forces, we have had the honor to assist 7,000 lone soldiers from over 68 countries from around the world. 68 countries, lone soldiers who have chosen to move to Israel alone and serve.
Part of the reason why I'm doing it is to be on the forefront of the Jewish memory, and I think that's a really incredible thing. There's a revolution in Judaism happening now where we're able to go back to our land, waiting for 2,000 years, and now like I'm able to just type in my PayPal password and go in instead of like hiking through deserts. And it's an incredible opportunity that I have, and that Nefesh B'Nefesh has given me, and that my parents and all of my Jewish education.
I am making Aliyah because it's something that I knew I'd be doing from the age of about 7 or 8 when I saw my oldest brother Gal come back from the army, and he had his wings from Sanchanim, and when I saw that I knew I wanted to do it. Even if I left the country, it didn't make any difference whatsoever to me. I knew I had to go home at some point. I hated leaving, and I always hated visiting and having to go back to the US. So now it's a one-way ticket, and I'm going home.
I made Aliyah from Los Angeles, California. I was born in the Czech Republic, and I decided I wanted to come to Israel.
I had to do something with my life, and that's why I came.
I joined the army when I was 25. I was in Nachal Battalion 932. Really felt like what's the word? I felt like I had a purpose.
Everything that happened with making Aliyah, coming over here, knowing that Nefesh B'Nefesh had all the information waiting for me, even if I didn't need the help, knowing that there was the body there.
You know, we have this Shabbat or Thanksgiving dinner.
שיתוף פעולה של נפש בנפש איתנו ביחד, אני חושב שמהווה איזשהו מכפיל כוח. התמיכה הזאת שיש לחייל, הכתובת, הטלפון שיש לו למי להתקשר, החבר'ה שבאים ללוות אותו בסוף מסלול או בסוף הטירונות או בסוף הקורס, אפילו שהוא יוצא הביתה בסוף שבוע. זה החיבוק החם, התמיכה ומה שאנחנו מצפים ורוצים לתת לאותו חייל.
Mi nombre es Dalia Levin, tengo 20 años.
I arrived in Israel 4 months ago from Cape Town, South Africa.
मैं बॉम्बे इंडिया से हूँ.
Florida, USA, Tampa Bay.
Azerbaijan, Cali, Colombia. From Elizabeth, New Jersey, USA. For Yona, Almen.
Kolot balevav peniima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulfate mizrach kadima ayin letzion tzofia.